All right. Hi, first graders. I hope you are all well and taking care of yourselves. This is your weekly reading video with Ms. Doyle, and we are going to be learning about a new story element called plot. For this lesson, you will need a piece of paper and something to write with if you have it. If you don't, that's okay, just follow along. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our objective for today. Our objective is I will understand and identify the plot in a story by close reading The Garden and completing a story diagram. Okay, so now we're going to look at the know, show, and how of this objective. What are we going to know? How are we going to show it? And how are we going to show that we've mastered it? So for our know, it's going to be plot. What we're going to know by the end of this lesson, according to our objective, is what plot is. How we're going to show that we know it, we're going to show by identifying and close reading the story. How we're going to show that we've mastered it at the end of the lesson is by completing a story diagram. Okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at our vocabulary high frequency words for this lesson. High frequency words means words that may be difficult that we will hear a lot today. So they're not quite sight words. They're something that might be more difficult and harder to read. So we're going to go through them so we know it when we go through our lesson today. So high frequency words. If you have a paper and pencil, go ahead and take that out now. For each of these words, I would like for you to write them down. You can go ahead and pause the video after we read through each one. Go ahead and write them down, and to challenge yourself, if you can, try to write each of the vocabulary words in a sentence. So make a sentence with the word in it for each one. So our first vocabulary word that we've already talked about today is plot. So we're going to learn what that means in a second, since that's a new word for most of us. Our next word is characters. We've already talked about characters, and most of us probably already know what it is, but we're going to be reviewing that today. And the next one is setting. Same as characters, we pretty much already know what that is, but we're going to look at it again. So that's setting. And then we're going to go ahead and move over to our Journeys book that we have online now. Okay. So then these are our high frequency words that are in our books. So each one of these boxes is a whole high frequency word. And these ones kind of already give you some sentences if you're having trouble writing them. So the first one is few. There are only a few trees here in box number 1. Box number 2 says night. The buds open in the day and close at night. Box number 3, loudly. The birds sang loudly in the tree. Box number 4, window. The big tree is very close to the window. Box number 5, noise. I heard a noise in the garden. Number 6, story. He tells a story about planting trees. Number 7, shall. We shall pick apples today. And number 8, world. My garden is the best place in the world. Okay, so if you haven't already, go ahead and write each of those words down. Try to write each of them in a sentence, but at least make sure you write the words down if you can. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and move on to learning our story element for the day. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and read this first page, number 12. It says, read and comprehend. Story structure, which is the same thing as story elements, are the parts of a story worked together. Characters are the people and animals. The setting is when and where a story takes place. So those we already know. Now we're going to go ahead and learn about what plot is. Events make up the plot. The plot is often about a problem and how characters solve it. A story map can help you tell about the different parts. Okay, so we learned that events make up the plot. Well, we know that events are things that happen in the story. Okay, so things that characters do or things that happen to the characters in a story that are important. Those are events. And those different things that happen in the story make up the plot. The plot is a problem and a solution in a story. So, pretty much every story we've ever read, there's probably some sort of problem that your characters are trying to solve in the story. And eventually, the story usually ends with them having some sort of solution. Okay, so in the story today, we'll be looking for the problem and the solution. And we're also going to be paying attention for who the characters are and what the setting is. Where is the story taking place and when? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and read page number 13. And yes, page number 13. Okay. Preview the topic, gardens. To make a garden grow, you start with seeds. You plant them in the soil. Then you can take care of them. You make sure they have enough water and sunlight. Soon, the seeds will start to grow. Tiny plants will pop up in the soil. Then they will get bigger. Soon you will have big plants with flowers or vegetables. Next, you will read a story about what happens when a character named Toad plants some seeds in the garden. Okay, so let's see what the garden is about. Okay, we're going to skip this page today and we're going to move over to this story. So this is our title page on page 15. We know it's a title page because we see the title and it tells us who our author is. So that's how we know, and it usually has a picture right there. So that's how we know it's our title page. All right, so as far as the story, I would encourage you guys to try reading it on your own. So when I turn to a new page, you can go ahead and pause it, read the story on your own, and then play it, and I will read it. Okay, so that way you're reading it on your own and also listening to me read it, if you can. If you're having too much trouble, that's okay, just listen to the story. Okay, so this is called The Garden, From Frog and Toad Together, by Arnold Lobel. All right, and our essential question on the bottom, so that's just going to help us stay on track with the story, is what grows in a garden? So be thinking about what grows in a garden, and by the end of the book, that question should be answered. Okay, so you can go ahead and pause it here if you're going to read it on your own. Frog was in his garden. Toad came walking by. "What a fine garden you have, Frog," he said. "Yes," said Frog, "it is very nice, but it was hard work." "I wish I had a garden," said Toad. "Here are some flower seeds. Plant them in the ground," said Frog, "and soon you will have a garden." "How soon?" asked Toad. "Quite soon," said Frog. Toad ran home. He planted the flower seeds. "Now, seeds," said Toad, "start growing." Toad walked up and down a few times. The seeds did not start to grow. So he planted these seeds and he wants to see them start growing right away. If any of us have ever planted anything, you probably know that's not going to happen. So let's see what Toad does about his garden. Toad put his head close to the ground and said loudly, "Now, seeds, start growing." Toad looked at the ground again. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head very close to the ground and shouted, "Now, seeds, start growing." Frog came running up the path. "What is all this noise?" he asked. "My seeds will not grow," said Toad. "You are shouting too much," said Frog. "These poor seeds are afraid to go." "My seeds are afraid to grow?" asked Toad. "Of course," said Frog. "Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them. Let the rain fall on them. Soon your seeds will start to grow." That night, Toad looked out of his window. "Drat," said Toad. "My seeds have not started to grow. They must be afraid of the dark." Toad went out to the garden with some candles. I will read the seeds a story, said Toad. Then they will not be afraid. Toad read a long story to his seeds. So at the bottom here it says, analyze the text, story structure. What is Toad's problem? How is he trying to solve it? So go ahead and turn, if there's someone next to you, a parent or someone at home, go ahead and turn to them and tell them what you think Toad's problem is in the story so far. And then after that, tell them how he thinks he's trying to solve it right now. What's his solution? So go ahead and turn and talk now. Go ahead and pause the video. All right, next page. All the next day, Toad sang songs to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad read poems to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad played music for his seeds. Toad looked at the ground. The seeds still did not start to grow. What shall I do? Cried Toad. There must be the most frightened seeds in the whole world. Then Toad felt very tired, and he fell asleep. Toad, Toad, wake up, said Frog. Look at your garden. Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up off the ground. At last, shouted Toad, my seeds have stopped being afraid to grow. And now you will have a nice garden too, said Frog. Yes, said Toad. But you were right, Frog. It was very hard work. All right, so that is the whole story. So now we're going to go ahead and review the diagram of story elements, and then we are going to fill it in with our own story elements from the garden. Okay, so just to review, at the top corner we're going to put characters. Next to that we're putting the setting, and then in the big box on the bottom we're putting the plot. So we're identifying what the problem and the solution was in the story. Okay, so on your paper, if you still have room, go ahead, turn around or get a new paper and try to make a little diagram that looks like this. So it would be a box, a line through it, and a line up top to separate characters, setting, and plot. Go ahead, pause the video if you need to. I got my own little box right here. Right. So yours should look like this and be empty right now and have identified character, setting, and plot up top. So in the first box in the top corner, you're going to put who the two characters were in that story. Go ahead and write them down if you can. If you don't know how to spell it, just wait. All right, so the first character was Frog. Let's see if I can do this. And then the second one was Toad. I'm probably only going to do this for characters in garden because this is taking me a long time. So T-O-A-D. All right. So once you have both of our two characters in that box, we're going to move over to the setting. So setting was, where did the story take place the whole time? They're pretty much always in the same spot. So go ahead and write that in your setting. If you need help, it's actually already kind of written on this screen. Just a little hint. Okay, so you should have identified that they were in the garden the whole time. So you already have it written up here. We'll go ahead and I'll try and write it again. G-A-R-D. Ooh, funky little E right there. And N. They were in the garden. Good job. All right, so now we're going to go down and identify plot. I'm not going to try and write it. We're just going to talk about it. Okay, so for the plot, what was the problem? Remember, the plot is the problem and the solution that the characters come up with in the story. So what was the problem that Toad or Frog were facing in the story? Go ahead, tell the person next to you or try writing it down. Okay, so the problem that I identified in the story was that Toad wants to grow a garden, but his seeds won't grow fast enough. They won't grow fast enough. He thought they were afraid. He was getting, there's a word for what he was with these seeds. It's when someone can't wait, they're having a hard time, they're getting impatient. That's the word that I would use to describe Toad, is that he was very impatient waiting for his garden to grow. Okay, so for problem, the first part of plot, is the problem, and it's that he wants to grow a garden, but his seeds won't grow. So hopefully you have that written down. For the next part, we have to see what the solution is. So how did the characters solve the problem? How did they solve that the seeds won't grow? Go ahead and tell the person next to you or write it down if you can. Okay, so for the solution I got is that he waters the seeds, he lets the sun hit them, and he waits until they grow. Okay, so he tried doing all these different solutions like reading to them, putting candles out by them, talking to them, shouting at them. I don't think any of those things helped the plants grow. I think it was watering, the sun, and waiting. You have to be patient with plants. Okay, so hopefully you got all those same things and you have your diagram filled out and your high frequency words written down. And if you didn't finish your sentences with your high frequency words or your vocabulary words, go ahead and finish those up now. And that's all I have for the video today. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the story. And take care, and I miss all of you so very much.